Pocho sampo pagyu trashi pa tuje tempe trinle yarngoda peke drolor zampe zebrache pande lame shabla solva de Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardhanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munisha Sane Karma Uta Vardhanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Om Guru Vajradhara Sumati Munishas Vardhanya Shri Bhadra Varsa Manya Sarva Siddhi Hum Pakyuke Kodanda Gilu Pakyuke Sundanda Pakyuke Tugdanda Giyi Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Lo Makyuke Kodanda Gilu Makyuke Sundanda Gi Nga Makyuke Tugdanda Tenyerme Chiktu Chingi Lo Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakya Muni Swo
Good morning. Very often, when we experience something, be it pleasurable or not, our tendency is to ask ourselves why, right? I have a feeling of malaise, and we ask ourselves why. And if we feel joy, we ask ourselves why. And from my point of view, the strange thing, or let's say the ignorant thing, and I'm part of this, is that we're looking for a reason. And when I ask myself, why do I feel like this? I'm trying to point my finger at the cause, when personally I'm convinced that for everything that we experience, there isn't a cause. There are the causes. And it's never just one. And I like imagining as if everything that we see, or everything we experience, a physical feeling. Before I was talking to Paula, I took advantage to talk to her about my problems, my allergies, etc. And the point is, we're looking for a cause, but I'm convinced that there's not just one cause. It's almost as we're looking at this moment, if we're trying to tell the story of this moment. I mean, what things were necessary to happen for us to be here in this moment together like this? I mean, how many things needed to have happened? And how many are the things, even small things, that the thoughts we've had, the choices we made, things said, how many of those things, if it weren't for them, we wouldn't be here today. And I'm convinced that if we each told the story of this present moment, I mean, how much time would we need to tell this story? We would spend our whole lives, and it wouldn't be enough. And just in a few words, every instant, every sensation, every aspect, every feeling is a result of a very, very complex equation. And every part of this equation is also the result of another previous equation. So when we ask, why? What's the cause? We will never find the cause. We can find within the equation something that weighed more than another, but it's not only that. In the same way, then that in that same and in the same way, this present moment is never the result of just only one thing. And our future can't be built on just one thing either. So when we're faced with a sickness, what kind of future do we want to build? Health. Health for ourselves, health for others. And this state of health can never be created based on one thing. And so what I try to do personally, and I think that it's the solution that I see, is that each of us, we need to do the best we can with the resources we have. Sometimes those resources that you have as you react, they can influence the equation and they can actually reach that objective. Sometimes there are not enough, or maybe they interact with another number and something else comes out, something else that we weren't expecting, because no one is aware of everything. So the question is, does meditation resolve everything? No, in the sense that it's not the solution. Does it help a lot? Yes. Like every other aspect that we put into place. In meditation, what's important, we use the term meditation, but in English, if I say meditate on love, what comes to you? What do you need to do if I tell you to meditate on love? What would you do to meditate on love? You would understand to reflect on love. You think about what love is and, who we should love. I don't know, whatever. But when we talk about meditation, the translation really doesn't hold water. So I try often to not use the word meditation. Instead, I prefer the word familiarization, because in Tibetan, the word is gom, that we use for meditation, actually means to get used to familiarize oneself. So the basic concept of meditation is I induce myself, I induce a positive mental state that I want to familiarize myself with. And the more I experience it, the more natural and spontaneous it will become. So what does meditate on love mean? Familiarize yourself with love. It means inducing a deep and sincere feeling of love and stay focused on that feeling so that you train and you familiarize yourself with that feeling. But today, what is known as meditation on a larger scale, that came together with this very fashionable word, mindfulness. I mean, excuse me for being so critical. We're really good at doing something, and we learn something. Meditation, in this case, that comes in a context, that comes from it comes down to us from experience the millennia, and it comes to us, and we take away all the so-called religious aspects of it, and we put a lot of emphasis on one aspect of it, and at a certain point it's almost like we've invented it, and we've done this with yoga, we do this with mindfulness, and there are other things that even spaghetti. The Chinese invented spaghetti. Anyway, this aside. But about meditation, what happens? It seems that meditation means mindfulness, and everything else is not really meditation, is a fake meditation. When instead we've taken a preliminary of meditation and a tremendous amount of emphasis was given to this preliminary aspect of meditation, taken away from, its millenary history. Does it have all these positive effects? Yes. For our heart rate and for our it releases and reduces anxiety, etc. But it was not an instrument that was developed for these positive physical, positive side effects. No, it's a technique developed to regain power over one's own mind. Once you can give direction to your mind, then we need to choose what we want to meditate on. Because mindfulness, and in Tibetan we use the word drempa, cherching, these two aspects that go together. Mindful recollection and vigilance. It's a little bit like learning how to drive. Once you know how to drive, then you decide where you want to go. So I learn how to keep my mind still, and I find tremendous benefit from that. Now that I'm able to keep my mind still, my question I ask myself is, what do I want to keep my mind on? Because we function based on habits, and the more I do something, the easier that thing becomes. The more I complain, the more I will complain. The more I criticize, the more I will criticize. The more I rejoice, the more my mind will spontaneously rejoice. And there's a part that's quite particular. How can I say? Even a relationship with our senses, with our perception with the external world, is a clear reflex of our inner reality. I'll give you a very simple example, personal example, but that really had me reflect a lot. One day, before building the temple, one of the architects came, the one that was here to do the road, and he said, "Here, I need to make transformation cabins." I said, "Okay, what's that?" And he shows me this and that, and just to make a long story short, 2.5 meters by 14 meters. I said, "How much is this going to cost?" 150,000, 1,000 euros. I said, nobody makes a transformation cabin at home. Why do we need to have one? I've never seen this ever. And the architect said, "No, they're around." And I said, "No, it's not true. I mean, do you have a transformation cabin at home? Have you ever seen any around?" I was in the middle of this problem, and then one day I took my car and needed to go to Malpensa, a road that I've taken so many times. And as I was on the road, one transformation cabin after another, and I assure you that the day before they weren't there. They weren't there. There are so many of these electrical transformation cabins, and now it's just in Sardinia, and I was like, "Oh, look, there's an electrical transformation cabin." There's some a little bit hidden, some are very obvious, and even those that are obvious, if we don't have in our mind the concept of electrical transformation cabin, we don't see them. And here you can open up a whole world that I don't want to, it's a subject that I want to open up right now. But the point is that we see what we have a if we what we have, we experience outside and we see what we have an inner correspondence for. If I feel like I was abandoned as a child, then I will have that feeling in many experiences. Like, for example, once there was one friend who was complaining about a situation, saying my partner doesn't recognize me, doesn't appreciate me. And I asked, well, have you ever felt like this before? And this person said, since a child I feel like this. My parents did the same. My teachers did the same. My schoolmates did the same. No one ever appreciated me. And I asked, well, what's the common denominator here? The common denominator here is yourself. If I put on pink lenses, I will see everything pink. So we have these lenses, these filters that show us the world in a certain way. And as we get older, the more we'll see that we have this tendency to repeat certain experiences. For example, we want to end a relationship with someone because there's some kind of unhealthy dynamic there. And then so we separate, and then we'll find ourselves in a very similar situation. And then, if we separate again, someone completely different, but then we realize that dynamic reappears later there. So, we see the world through what reflects from inside of ourselves. This awareness is very, very important. The awareness that we live in a subjective reality is very important. And meditation, and mindfulness aside, has to do with a sincere attitude of love and affection towards oneself. There's an important part here. And I'm trying to abbreviate here a little bit. Let me just get right to the point. Let's imagine a leaf that fell. The first time this happened, I was actually at the seaside. I went to take a walk on the beach. I was dressed. It was evening, and there were the waves that were coming, and I was playing a little bit, saying, "Oh, don't come too close, don't get me wet," to the waves. So I get a bit close, get closer and closer, and then of course until that a big wave came and got me all wet. But I asked myself something, and sometimes the questions are more important than the answers. And the question was, why does one wave get to this point and another wave gets to that point? What determines the position, final position of the wave? And so where does the wave end there as a result of a complex equation? Are there many variables, or is it just is it random? Does it have to do with the weather and the currents and the moon and the fish that are in the water, etc., etc.? So the answer is, or the wave or a leaf. The question is it random, that position, or is it perfect? Perfect in the sense that given all of the variables, it could only be that as a result. It's perfect, isn't it? We all agree, right? So now let's imagine ourselves. imagine ourselves like the wave or the leaf that falls as the result of this complex equation. You can decide if you're more poetic or you're more, or if you like more to be more cerebral. So think about everything in our lives and how we are today, our physical state, our emotional state, our economic state. Is this just a random result, or is this a result of the variables? It's perfect. It's perfect. Not perfect in the sense that we are exactly how we want to be, but perfect in the sense that given all of the interactions that have come before, we can only be as we are now. And when you're in front of someone, for example, maybe someone that bothers you, someone you know, or a historical figure, imagine that person in front of you and ask yourself, is this person perfect or completely his being is random? It's difficult to say, but it's perfect. He's perfect. Given all of the interactions, he couldn't be different. And what happens here? In this present moment, we have, the question is, do we have free will or not? Are we conditioned in our choices? Are we free from our past? Are we free from our influences and cultural experiences from education, etc.? Or free from past traumas? Are we free from our environment, the people around us, or chemical aspects of our body and the environment? No. So where's our freedom? Where does our freedom lie? I think if we looked at 360 degrees, our freedom is like half of a degree, maybe not even that much. But in this present moment, in every moment, we have this ability to ask ourselves, do I go? Do I not go? Do I follow this thought? Do I not follow this thought? Every morning we wake up. Do we have the freedom to sit down and meditate or not when we're in front of that person? Do we have the freedom to be kind or not to be kind, or to help this person or not help this person? So there are some things where we are so strongly conditioned that it's hard for us to go against that conditioning. But if we have this half of degree of freedom, and if you look, that little bit of choice long term can make a tremendous distance. So we have an enormous potential, and this potential lies within our mind. Our freedom is in our mind because our thoughts direct our actions. So in this case, the question that we ask ourselves is, what are the mental states, emotional states? Remember that in Buddhism, when we talk about mind, we don't make a distinction between the cognitive part and the emotional part. We have different words to distinguish them, the conscious, the subconscious, let's say, part. We have infinite. We have many words to divide, to explain the mind. But what are those inner states within that are bad for us, and what are the ones that are beneficial, that are good for us? Once we can highlight some of those. So let's give some examples, classic examples. Things that are bad for us: anger, jealousy, envy, resentment, fear, anxiety, just to name some, arrogance. And some that are good for us: gratitude, satisfaction, stability, concentration, love, respect, compassion, awareness, generosity, humbleness, not understood as feeling inferior, but instead not having the need to compare ourselves to others. These are things that the more I have, the better off I am. Anger, anger, the more I have, the worse off I am. Love, the more I have, the better off I am. And once we're able to recognize that these characteristics are beneficial, they're good for us, the question that comes is, what can I do to develop these characteristics more? And how can I eliminate the others? And this is very important. Yesterday we said sickness is to be known, its causes are to be abandoned, and the state of health is to be obtained. And the cure, the process of healing is to be taken up. So we reach health not by going against the sickness, but by going towards health. For example, if I have a dark room, we can't eliminate the darkness going against the darkness. We eliminate darkness by bringing in light. You can't eliminate anger by going against anger. You eliminate anger by developing patience and love. So we need to apply the antidote. And in the same way, if there's a sickness, we need to find the antidote to that sickness. So it's right to look at those inner states that are harmful, but we shouldn't go against them. Then we end up in the trap of feeling guilty. Oh, look, I get angry. I'm such a bad person. No. Instead, we need to put energy towards the antidote. We recognize where the darkness is and we apply the light. Is that clear? So meditation, in this sense, we generate awareness about the aspects that we want to overcome or develop, and then we induce, even artificially, non-spontaneous, we generate these emotional and mental states of being that are virtuous and positive that we want to develop. Let's get an example. There's a word, Pagyu, in Tibetan, that is translated conscientiousness is the term used. Conscientiousness, what it actually means, I'm not really sure, but I think this is the meaning that has been attributed to Pagyu. It's our ability to be aware of what we already know. For example, it's one of the first aspects of Buddhism, beyond mindfulness. Within Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, we should meditate on the preciousness of this life, and then impermanence and the certainty of life. Let me try to explain quickly. Here's a question for you. Are we going to die, yes or no? Is there anyone here that has a doubt about this? So if I were to ask you, are you mortal or immortal in this body, in this life? Are you mortal or immortal? We're mortal. So do we have to die? Yes. Have you ever heard anyone say, or even yourself, maybe say, if I were ever to die? And I ask, what, do you have other possibilities? Are there alternatives here? So even if we know that we are mortal, we live our daily life. Do we live this awareness within our daily life, or do we live as if we were immortal within this mortality? To understand this better, let me give you a very simple example. Are we going to die here or not? Yes. Okay, so when? I don't know, all right? But now think for yourselves. When are you going to die? Your answer, I don't know. But this, I don't know, does that include today? Or is it in 20 years' time, yeah, I will die, but now I'm young and I have all these things to do. I can't die now. Conceptually we say, I don't know. But in our gut, in a deeper way, in a non-conceptual way, are we really aware that we could die at any moment, including at some point today, or is it something that we put towards the future? I have accompanied many people in their last days of life, and I assure you that I never knew anyone who wasn't aware of his own mortality until the very, very end. And those who had more awareness, they were able really to face death with a tremendous amount of dignity and strength. But now we're not going to open this subject now. In our daily choices, in our daily actions, are we aware of our mortality or not? No. I assure you that if we had the real awareness that we could die at any moment, we would live our lives differently. A year ago, I had an anaphylactic shock. There was Elkanah was here to help me, and this experience really touched me. I had this meeting with an insect, and all of this came out, and it really taught me something. And some doctors, talking to doctors afterwards, they said that that wasn't great what happened to you. It really was quite risky, and it really changed me because I realized this is not something conceptual. I mean, I really could die at any moment. So it's really important at that point to look again at my priorities. So what does living in the conscientiousness of one's own mortality? It means giving importance to every day. This is important for all of us. It means to procrastinate less. It means really looking at our priorities. So if we want to live life fully, how important is it to be aware, deeply aware of one's own mortality, which doesn't mean living afraid of dying. It means recognizing the value of every moment. That's absolutely fundamental. And along the Buddhist path, one of the first meditations that we do is meditating on the preciousness of this life, how the conditions that we have are so difficult to find and how valuable they are, and be sure of death so we meditate on the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the time of death. And one concludes this meditation when one really feels, not conceptually, but one actually feels within one's bones that we could die at any moment. Is that clear? how do we do such a meditation? The first important thing is to remember that any phenomenon can be an object of meditation. We can familiarize ourselves with anything. Okay? Let's give an example of what we just said. First, we start with what's called analytical meditation, and then we go to single to single-minded meditation. So how do we do it? You choose a subject, and we can imagine. We can do it also in a group. If you do it by yourselves, you choose a topic. In this case, the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the moment of death. And we imagine that we have someone in front of us that is completely against this idea, who plays the so-called devil's advocate. And you need to try to convince the person why we are so sure of what we're sure of. That in this case, the certainty of death and the uncertainty of the moment of death. And well, I'm young. I can't die. And you say, well, young people don't die, etc. You can go on and on with until we get to a conclusion. And that when we finally get to a valid inferential cognition, that's the technical term that we use, a valid inferential cognition. So for example, I know that there is fire behind the mountain because I see smoke. I see the smoke and I say, okay, there's fire. This is an inference. And so we follow our logic and we get to a conclusion. Once we get to the conclusion, we direct our attention to the conclusion and we stay on that conclusion single-pointedly. To train in analytical meditation, and there are many of you here who are studying, Buddhist philosophy is based a lot on this. I'm simplifying here. Our teacher would explain a concept, for example, a passage, a concept, and it seemed absolutely clear. And then he would say, well, why is this like this if that is like that? And really put doubt on what he had just said that seemed so clear. And then he wouldn't explain, and it would be up to us to try to find the answer. So, and the roles that we each played within this group was to try to deconstruct. It wasn't about finding what was right, but it was trying to see that topic, that argument from many, many different points of view. And the more we do this, the more that thesis, that hypothesis becomes clear within. That's why in our studies, along our studies, let's say it was 30% listen, 10% reading, and the rest was debate. About 3 to 6 hours a day of debate without teachers, only among students. And from 1 to 5 years we would spend doing this, depending on one's predisposition for studies. But even without doing this, if we just take a topic and we try to really deconstruct it and look for opposite points of view and reinforce what we think is right and what follows our logic. This is a form of analytical meditation that can be done in a group with 2 people or more people. We would do it in the monastery where I studied. There were moments of debate once a week, where 2 would answer. One would begin. 100 people would be listening, and then anybody could stand up and ask a question. But this allowed us to go around, to reflect on things and really get to a clear conclusion. And then that conclusion was no longer, something that someone just told us. It's something that we're absolutely sure about. Here we take a topic like the certainty of death. There's no one here that really will think that he won't die, but there are many others that can stimulate different points of view. So to do this more and more, this is the analytical meditation process, and it's very important for us to do this. For example, an analytical meditation on anger, for example. On anger means one imagines that one is trying to convince someone that no matter what happens, it's not a valid reason to get angry. And one gets to the conclusion, say, okay, at that point, we go to the next point to meditate on. So this is analytic meditation. If I'm able to keep my mind on one subject, on something specific, are sugars good or bad, for tumors? And as I'm reflecting on this, and then I start thinking about, my uncle who called me yesterday, and Instagram posts, and what I'm going to have for lunch, etc. Obviously, it's not going to be as powerful. And when we do this analytical meditation with someone else, it doesn't have to be something in silence. The way I did it, when we studied it, is very lively. When we ask a question, we slap our hands. Those you ask the question standing, for example. So I was able to stay debating a topic in front of many, many people, and at a certain point I absolutely lost sight of who was in front of me. I couldn't even feel my hand slapping against the other. I was totally lost also any kind of concept of time and space, because the only thing that I had in my mind was that logical process that I was developing. And this is something that really can happen during this analytical meditation. And I leave this as a kind of seed for you, for your studies. And we can do this also on anger or on the certainty of death. This is clear up to this point, right? So, of course, to do this, it's useful to sit down first, relax a little bit, do the exercise we did before, 9-round breathing exercise, and let go of distractions and pick up the reins in your hand and then ask yourselves, okay, where are we going now? What do we want to analyze? Because if you try to do an analytical meditation while you're distracted by 1,000 different other things, it's not really going to work. Another thing that's fundamental for meditation is is to take away distractions, and that doesn't mean putting your phone on airplane mode. That means turning your phone off. And then once you've become an absolute expert, in meditation and perfect concentration, you can keep your phone on all the time in front of you, going constantly. So single-pointed meditation instead. We said before that to meditate means to familiarize ourselves. But what should we be familiarizing ourselves with? Let's use the example of love. One thing is about reflecting on the meaning of love. What am I familiarizing myself with? Am I familiarizing myself with the feeling of love or the concept of love? And what we want is to familiarize ourselves with the feeling of love, not the concept. So to meditate on love, I need to induce that feeling. Patience. I need to induce the feeling of patience. Oh, as before we talked about inducing this awareness of our mortality. How can we do this? First of all, we start with the analytical meditation, as we did. There's no reason in the world to get angry, and there are other aspects, there are other techniques to open up our heart, and it's a different process. So we conclude that process, and at that point we go back to our breath. That analytical conclusion we put to the side, and now we imagine a situation that brings us to the opposite of what we want to develop. So if we wanted to meditate on patience, I imagine a situation that brings me angry. If I want to meditate on mortality, then I recall an experience where I live as if I were immortal. I allow that anger to begin to arise, and at that point I go back to the conclusion from the analytical meditation and I apply it. That's where we apply our free will. How do I act now in this situation? I don't want to get angry anymore. It's not good for me. And at that point, I can choose to not follow that feeling until I'm able to generate the opposite feeling with that process before of awareness and gratitude, affection, love, etc., until I'm able to not react with aggression in front of my object of anger. I'm in front of the object of anger, and it's not possible to train in patience without an object of anger. Because if otherwise we would be training in the concept of patience. In the same way, it's impossible to meditate on love without an object of love. It's almost at the beginning I prepared my antidote and I put it aside, and then I want to recognize where the darkness is, and then I take that light and I bring it to where the darkness is. If we do this meditation well, the first times on patience, for example, one will end up, would finish the meditation angry, which means that you're doing it well, that it's not just a mental game, that little by little you'll be able to finish your meditation really with a full sense of love and not in anger. What's happening here? In our mind, there's an enormous difference between what we understand and the experiences that we actually live. Our experiences talk much stronger than the concepts that we're able to grasp. When we imagine something for our mind, it's as if we had lived it. Albagnano told me talked to me about research, who talked about the power of visualization, and crazy things, considering the worldview. I tried one. It didn't work for me. There was one study, from what I understood, what I remember. They took people, they divided them into two pools and randomly, two random groups, and half did physical exercises and the other half just had to imagine doing those physical exercises. And at the end of the research, both groups developed actual muscle mass. And I thought, well, for me, this is great because I don't like doing physical exercise. But then I realized that imagining physical exercise is almost more tiring than actually doing the exercise. I mean, imagine yourself in the pool. You have to lift up your arm and then lift up the other arm and then. But the point is that when we imagine something for our mind, I'm not going to say it's the same because I don't think it's the same, but it's extremely similar to actually doing that thing. It stays in our memory as an experience lived. So when I imagine a difficult experience and in my imagination I'm able to face it in a positive way, number one, I'm in a protected context. I'm in my room, wherever I am, and if I'm not able, nothing really happens. And if I'm able to manage it well, then I'm really helping myself. And if I'm able to do it well, I don't just stop there. I do it again and again. And then when I actually physically find myself in a situation similar like that, I can recall the experiences, the positive experiences that I lived in meditation to then act positively in reality. So when we're able to induce these positive positive qualities, positive reactions, things that don't come spontaneously, but we're able to generate them, then we're effectively training and developing these qualities. I think that we meditate often without realizing it. When we're there full of resentment, that moment, that object of anger, which is again and again, thinking about it, thinking again. And this is meditation backwards. It's non-voluntary. That is very harmful. So at the end of the day, what is meditation? It's familiarizing ourselves with awareness, with what we want to develop. This is what meditation is. That is beyond mindfulness, which doesn't mean that mindfulness is not beneficial. I don't want to take anything away from mindfulness. But that when we talk about meditation, that mindfulness, that's the first step where one learns to take the reins into one's hands. But once you've learned how to control your mind, then now you can really start a meditation process. So what are the tools that we can use that can help us do this? One very used tool is visualization, because let me give you an example. Meditating on love and compassion, for example, there are 4 important qualities to develop. Love, which is desiring happiness; compassion, to desire one to be free from suffering; equanimity, which means not making distinction between one or another; and then joy, being able to rejoice for the happiness of others. These 4 qualities are important. A technique of meditation is where first we generate. I'm being very I'm summarizing this almost too much. But let's say in this preliminary practice, we generate love towards ourselves, where we recognize our own suffering. We see ourselves, and then I imagine from my heart light rays that go towards other beings and around me. I imagine my father to my right, my sister, my mother, sorry, my father to my right, my mother to my left, and all my close family members around us, and the infinite acquaintances and people we don't know behind us, beings, and then maybe those with whom we have a negative karmic connection, let's say those who disturb our minds in front of us. So let's say attraction to our sides, indifference behind, and aversion in front. So we imagine all these beings around us, and we imagine these light rays that go to them all at the same time. They go to each one, and they transform into what they need. Medicine for those who are sick, affection for those who feel alone, heat for those who are cold, food for those who are hungry, etc., etc. Bringing these beings to a state of well-being, and these light rays transform also into a guide, and they learn also to develop their own qualities and bringing them to a deep sense of peace. And then these light rays reabsorb into our heart, taking us to a deep sense of well-being. What are we developing here? When the light rays go to everyone without difference, we're training in equanimity. It's not that the light rays go first to those to my sides, and then those around me, and then behind, and then those in front. No, they go all to everyone all at the same time. And those light rays bring them towards happiness, and we're training in love. We imagine that eliminates their suffering, and so we're training in compassion, eliminating their suffering, and we feel joy for their joy. We're training in rejoicing. So through visualization, we are inducing these feelings within. Is that clear? So just a small piece of advice, and you can try. When we're in front of someone who's not well, a patient, a friend, a family member, co-worker, I'm simplifying maybe even too much, but it'll still work. We imagine at the center of our chest, there's our feeling of love, something pure. And from here, these light rays go towards the person in front of us, and doing these four things: joy, eliminating suffering. And by eliminating suffering, the person feels better, and that brings us a sense of joy. We rejoice for eliminating their suffering. It's simple but very powerful. This feeling of sincere love has a tremendous power in the process of healing, in the healing process. So, of course, your doctors and you do all the other therapies that are necessary, but this is already so much. This feeling, inducing this feeling of love, compassion towards others. So we use forms to cultivate that which is formless through visualization. And we can add recitation and gestures. So meditation can have many aspects to it. to complement this objective. It's important for us to remember that we can't choose to familiarize ourselves or not familiarize ourselves. What we can choose what we are familiarizing ourselves with. I don't know if this concept is clear. We all live in a constant process of familiarization. Constantly. The more I do something, the easier it becomes, and vice versa. So, meditation is an inner familiarization that we do with awareness. And remember that the most powerful tool that we have in our lives is our own mind. So we saw today, we have this awareness that we need to train our body, but it would be wonderful if there was the gym for the mind. One goes to the gym to do a half an hour of mental exercises. When we go to our personal trainer, and the personal trainer says, "Oh, your self-esteem is not very high. Your patience is quite low. So you need to do this for your patience, this for your self-esteem." This is what we're talking about, and the fundamental point, and with this I conclude, is that our inner state of being, our emotional state of being, is not a reflection of the world around us and the situations we live. It's the opposite. Are we influenced by the experiences we live? Yes. But it's like the double arrow. One influences, they influence each other reciprocally. Our freedom, our free will is in our mind and nowhere else. That little bit of free will that we have this freedom to direct ourselves, and with that little bit of freedom we can make very important changes. So I invite you all to choose the direction that you want to go, to take the reins in your own hands. And someone might say, it's difficult. Yes, it's difficult. The point is, meditating is tiresome when we're not used to it. Once we're used to it, it's not tiring. But not meditating is even more tiresome. In other words, if I don't meditate, I'll lose a lot more energy. It's like having an unhealthy lifestyle. Having an unhealthy lifestyle uses up much more energy than having a healthy lifestyle. Maybe it's more spontaneous because we're more used to living an unhealthy lifestyle, but we're using up a tremendous amount of energy. That's clear, isn't it? And it's the same thing for the mind. So this is what I wanted mostly to share with you this morning. And the good news is that we have much greater potential than what we're aware of. And with very little, you can do a lot. Okay. But if I could just add one more thing, if we think that our mind is precious, if we think that our mind is the most worthy tool that we have, then we absolutely need to take care of it and protect it. The mind is directly related to the body, and there are certain dynamics in the mind, this mind-body connection that are very, very powerful. For example, these chemical connections with dopamine and serotonin, etc., cortisol. So I invite you all, if you're courageous enough, to close for 1 week social media. For 1 week, no Instagram, no Facebook, not be there on your phone for every small thing. Use your phone for what you need, absolutely need to use it for, but not for anything else. Try to do this for 1 week, and you'll see that in the first couple days you'll go into abstinence, but then afterwards you'll feel a lot better. I'm absolutely sure. Yesterday, here we have decided to leave social media because I believe that it's a very unhealthy, and I don't want to be part of that. Talking to a friend who works in this sector, she actually has left social media for her own private use. And she said, I now have time to read the books that I before didn't think I had time to read. I have much more space. So we're drugged. We're drugged. What we said yesterday about drugs and this relationship with food and sugar that can have the same effect as cocaine. I'm sure that the effect that the social media have on us, chemically speaking, is the same. I've experienced it myself. In just a short time ago, I spent the night without up all night because I needed to take care of the puppies. And at a certain point, I was so sleepy, and I just picked up my phone and I went onto YouTube, and then I saw that there was this new sector called shorts. I thought, oh, And at a certain point, I realized that I went into this deep meditative samadhi. And I woke up, let's say I came out of it about 3 hours later. I tried to stop, I wasn't able. And the worst thing is that the day after, as soon as I had an empty space between one thing and another, what did I want to do? I wanted to go back to these YouTube shorts. This is a sign of addiction. So what did I do? So for me personally, if there's something that I don't like, I just cut it out immediately. I don't do it. But I saw how strong that desire was. And then I developed this addiction to news. But actually, I'm not really interested in the news. I'm interested in that dopamine that comes when we see something new, and that creates this inner mechanism that is the absolute opposite of what we want to develop with meditation. So if we want to give value to our mind and this ability to understand and to deepen our understanding, then we need to get rid of unnecessary stimuli. So try this for yourselves. Close the social media for 1 week, 10 days. And you'll see if you're courageous enough. And if you feel good, then you can continue like that. If instead you didn't have a positive experience, then you go back to it. If we look at the research done, if we look at all the research that's been done, and this is bad for you, this is good, this is bad for you, this is good for you, but then we say to ourselves, oh, well, I don't have a tumor yet, so I don't need to follow any of this. No. Tell someone to meditate. In the middle of this enormous quantity of stimuli is like telling someone to not eat sugar living inside a chocolate factory. It's really difficult, tiresome. And for this reason, I invite you to give it a try, to because the fewer stimuli that we have, the easier it will be to take the reins in our own hands. And if you want to have a more meaningful life, if you want to be able to have deeper understandings, etc., then we need to give ourselves the right conditions. For example, I can't listen to certain types of music because there's certain melodies, tunes that if I hear them, then they just stay in my head, like that little baby shark tune. I wish I'd never heard that. It got in my head, and it just took days or weeks to get it out of my head. And even now, I just hear it for once, and then it just comes to my head. I sit down to meditate, and what comes to my mind? Baby shark. So what I'm talking about is simply, it's important for us to recognize our weaknesses and protect ourselves from these weaknesses of ours. Most of us, so we don't have the strength to keep our mind stable amidst this enormous quantity of stimuli. So let's protect ourselves. Is that clear? Thank you. We're a little bit late. We have one fewer speakers today, so we can manage this a little bit. But it's important because the problem isn't meditating. Meditating is easy. The technique itself is easy. What's difficult is desiring it, seeing the importance of meditating. Also, exercise is easy. Going to run is easy. But what's difficult is actually doing it. So reflecting together on the why is more important than the actual understanding of the techniques. Thank you.